We're sitting down at the Blockchain Expo North America with David Schwartz. He's the founder of Cornerstone Global Management, as well as the project director of the Litecoin Foundation. So thank you for sitting down with us, David.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. So I'm curious a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So got into cryptos mid-late of 2017, and really just kind of loved the idea of shifting some of my money into a place that was probably going to earn more than what I was getting at the time, which kind of coincided with an article that I saw about Bitcoin, so I decided to invest a little bit in Bitcoin, and then started learning about some of the other projects and cryptocurrencies in the space, and then I sort of, from there, realized that I really liked the concept and the technology behind Litecoin, and I also really had a lot of respect for the creator, Charlie Lee, for the way that he handled himself in a lot of different things. He really made it more about people versus person, and just some of his values kind of resonated with me, so I started following Litecoin a little bit closer, and then I ended up volunteering for the foundation for about 10 months, and then got picked up as a project director in 2018, and so I've been doing that for a little over a year.
So I entered the space in like 2012, and at that point there wasn't much in blockchain beyond Bitcoin or Litecoin, and at that point Bitcoin had already sort of established itself as a digital gold in a way, and Litecoin was oftentimes referred to as a silver.
Mm-hmm.
Did you come across this philosophy at all, and did it resonate with you?
Yeah, actually it did resonate with me, and I know some people say it's pretty cliche, or it's been around for a long time. By the way, you're an OG, man. 2012 is it's getting pretty close to the origination date, so it's pretty cool.
It's been it was a very good decision at that point to kind of enter into the space, because it did give me, I guess, a professional career.
Yeah. So I have a lot of respect for people like you who got into this space early, and you found a way to sort of help cultivate the ecosystem, and you contribute in a lot of different ways, and I really respect that. But I would say, back to your question, it resonated with me being the silver to the gold, because in my mind, having read some history and other parts having to do with economics, it always seemed to me that if there was something that was valuable to everybody, like just hands down, it was valuable to everybody, at some point it didn't become a currency anymore, or something that was used to exchange in a regular way. It was something that ended up getting hoarded, or like if you look at old buildings from whatever time period, they're using it to paint the walls to show the status of the royalty or whoever it was, but it didn't get used as much necessarily as a means of exchange between people or countries or anything else. And so there was always silver that ended up getting used more for coins than anything else, and so the silver to Bitcoin's gold really fits for me, because if you look at the trajectory for those two currencies specifically at this point, Bitcoin is going to end up being more of a store of value than it will be a means of exchange. People will still use it for that, but it won't be used nearly as much as perhaps it was intended at the beginning, and Litecoin can kind of fill that part of the void by doing that. Plus it helps in a lot of ways with testing technological things first, before it gets put onto the Bitcoin side of things. And if Litecoin were to go down for whatever reason because of something that was implemented, then at least Bitcoin is still up and running, and doesn't necessarily ruin the complete ecosystem. It's a very positive, to me, it's a very positive coin to have in the system.
When you entered into the space and started researching Litecoin, what were some of the things that were going on at that time?
So at that time, I think SegWit was a big deal, right? And so Litecoin ended up being sort of the test net for that as well. Charlie decided to put his money where his mouth was, with some things, and even put up like $1 million to say this is going to work. 2x wasn't necessary. I just the way that the community carried itself, everything just sort of resonated with me in a way that I wasn't necessarily seeing with other projects.
It seems today that payments is still a problem that people are trying to solve. There's lots of projects out there that are dedicated to payments that haven't caught on. Stablecoins have caught on and are perhaps filling a void when it comes to, if not payments, then, well, I think payments and transactions. Because people can transact with stablecoins and know that if they send a stablecoin from country A to country B, that when the stablecoin is redeemed in country B, it will still be the same value, whereas with Bitcoin, there's a lot of volatility, which scares people. However, Litecoin all the while has kind of been focusing on this payments niche. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think stablecoins definitely have a place, and I can see why they're popular. I don't know necessarily if that's going to be necessary in the future as an alternate currency, right? So, in reality, it's almost becoming just like the shell of something that's put inside, and it's carried from point A to point B, but it's not really, it doesn't have its own value per se. It's pegged off of the dollar or something else. Whereas Litecoin literally is its own cryptocurrency, its own currency. And in being that, it has a different level to it that stable coins don't have. And at some point when, sovereign nations create their own digital currency, the digital dollar, yuan, yen, or whatever else, where then does the stable coin fit in respect to what you mentioned earlier about moving it from point A to point B, right? Does it still have a place there? I don't know. Maybe. It depends on whether or not those digital currencies still utilize the same types of systems to transport back and forth, right? Because, Swift now, it's fairly antiquated, and do you end up having a different system that does the same thing yet still has all of the same issues, which then you can introduce other currencies as well. Like I know people who are into XRP and others will provide that same argument. Well, you can use it to do the transcontinental transfers or whatever. But for Litecoin, I think there are two main things that you can kind of hang your hat on with that, and one is the store of value, right? It will have a store of value, whereas when you're talking stable coins, the value is really pegged to the dollar. There's no intrinsic value. There's no value in and of itself other than what's constructed through that. But with Litecoin, it's literally the value is in the value of the people that are using it. It's an actual currency, and I think those are things that can't just be ignored.
Why was the independence of Litecoin important to you?
Why was the what?
The independence of Litecoin compared to a stable coin.
Yeah, I think because stable coins are usually, they're coming from a centralized, entity. So if you're talking about Litecoin, you're talking about decentralized cryptocurrency or currency in general, which means, it's borderless. No government is really controlling it. There's no central authority that you can either attack or, like Facebook with Libra, perfect example. It comes out with Libra, everybody's like, wow, this is however you want to see it, good, bad, or anything in between. But the U.S. government goes, you need to shut that down. And they know exactly who to tell, and they know exactly who to watch to see if it gets shut down. Whereas with, Bitcoin or Litecoin and a few others that are decentralized, that's not necessarily the case. You literally have to try and, there's no single point of weakness or single point of attack. And because that's spread out throughout the world, all the nodes that are verifying the transactions and so on and so forth. So to me, I think that's really key, and you're not going to get that with every currency.
Are there any other cryptocurrencies out there that Litecoin or the Litecoin Foundation views as potential competitors or kindred spirits?
Yeah, I wouldn't go the competitor route, because I think even if there are some that are similar, the space is so young right now that in reality it's kind of more like it's not necessarily competing so much as it is enlarging the space, right? So if I know a lot of people, they would try and say maybe perhaps Digibyte, which is another decentralized cryptocurrency, right? The transactions are faster, or, there's more of them, so it's easier to use. But in reality, anybody who's part of that community, the Digibyte community, a lot of them are also Litecoin and Bitcoin advocates, and vice versa. And so they end up helping each other outside of, Jarek Tate is still around. He's the creator of Digibyte, right? And Charlie Lee's around. He's the creator of Litecoin. And even though perhaps on that surface you don't see some kind of a kumbaya moment where they all get together as leaders and do something, it doesn't mean that the communities can't do that. And so I believe they do that, right? So they're not necessarily competitors in that sense. And I think there will be a natural pruning of the ecosystem that'll occur, and that'll be based off of need and usage versus who's got the loudest voice on social media or however else they bring it across.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not sure if this is true of the entire space, but certainly on an app like Telegram, there's a lot of tribalism between the different cryptocurrency communities.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. Yeah, I do steer away from the Telegram groups, simply because at this point there's so much to do and so much going on. The noise from that respect is not something that I don't need that right now in my life. So I really just concentrate on the goals and the things that I'm trying to do for the system, the ecosystem as a whole, and for Bitcoin and Litecoin. So I do avoid those. And I understand why some people may feel that way, but it becomes, like you said, very, tribalistic, religious, however you want to put it. And I just don't believe that there can or has to be one singular solution to everything. That's the entire premise behind how we are who we are as people, is there's always options and there's always things that people can do to fix something. It doesn't have to be a part of one thing. So the idea that Bitcoin solves all, ideologically sounds great, but is it realistic? Probably not.
Yeah, I think I take issue with Telegram in general, and for several reasons. I guess number one is is it an asynchronous chat? It seems to be kind of akin to the message boards of the 90s. So it's almost like we're taking steps back in terms of communicating with each other. And then you can join a Telegram group and you're not sure who these people are or where their interests lie, or if they have conflicting interests. Maybe they drop in and say that a particular blockchain project into some Telegram group is innovative, and as far as you know, that they're part of a bounty, a token bounty, or they're working directly with the project. So I'm curious, what is going on at the Litecoin Foundation today? What are you working on?
So I think the key things that we're working on right now would obviously be, and you've probably heard this in the last 2 weeks, is working towards Mimblewimble and confidential transactions for Litecoin. So being able to have the option, like to opt in on having a transaction that is private in nature, as in, David sends Justin X amount of Litecoin, right? You may be able to tell wallet A belongs to David, wallet B belongs to Justin, but the amount that gets transacted doesn't necessarily have to be something everybody needs to know about. And, that is basically the last thing missing for Litecoin or even Bitcoin to be considered fungible, right? And so once that is put in place, I think you're going to see a spiked interest in any cryptocurrency that does it in that fashion. I mean, people follow and use Monero and Zcash and Dash and a few others, but those are incorporated from the beginning into those coins as privacy coins. And obviously they do have a bit of a target on their back because of that, whether that's positive or negative. But if you're able to have the opportunity to build it in, not touch the core blockchain at all, and have it as some type of a second layer where people are able to opt in to have a private transaction occur, I think that's a game changer for Bitcoin and Litecoin or any other decentralized cryptocurrency that can pull that off.
And I guess this is something that perhaps people aren't up to date with, is that there's still a lot of active development going on Litecoin. Perhaps there was a period, I'm not too familiar with the development history of Litecoin, but I know that Charlie was working at Coinbase and very busy there. Then he left Coinbase to dedicate his time to Litecoin. And I imagine that there's probably been a lot in the works during that time that hasn't come to light yet.
Yeah, and I think there were a few tweets that happened. I don't know if you're on Twitter or not, but there were a few tweets a while back where he tried to explain the delay sometimes, and because most developers point to GitHub. If there isn't something happening on GitHub, there's nothing happening, and that's not always true, right? Many times those commits can be put on there after the fact, but even then, it doesn't mean that there isn't something going on. And so I think the fact that Litecoin is able to utilize Bitcoin development, I thought that was brilliant. Some people call it lazy, but in some terms, why wouldn't you be able to create something where you don't have to do all the heavy lifting all the time, right? And you're able to take something that you feel fits the Litecoin perspective and put it into the blockchain as upgrades that somebody else has already worked on. You tweak it, to obviously fit script and go from there. And so sometimes, if you only have 2 or 3 developers working on something for a coin that doesn't need to have 75 developers working on it, simultaneously all the time, I don't see how that's a bad thing necessarily, So then when you do need to ramp it up for something, I mean, even look at Mimblewimble. We're utilizing David Burkett, who works with Grin, right? He's actually the one helping us with implementing Mimblewimble into Litecoin. It was a very prudent, long process to try and figure out if this was really something we wanted to do. But then after that preliminary period was done, we decided, okay, this is something that would be great for Litecoin. Consensus happened, and because it wasn't the foundation that decided that, it was the people out there who decided it. So it's a community thing where the decision's made, and so the foundation then helps by sponsoring or putting in Litecoin or money towards the development for it. But yeah, I think you don't need to have 200 developers working on something at one single time for it to be a successful project.
Yeah, I'll just say the name. There's this company called Genesis Coin. It's a Bitcoin ATM, and there's been one developer working on that for many years, and that company has been more productive than a large percentage of the space.
Efficiency, right? Efficiency, yeah.
So I'm curious, when Litecoin, there's a lot of talk in the industry of like enterprise uses of blockchain and digital assets. Then, of course, there's the consumer focus, maybe cryptocurrency focus. Where does Litecoin fit in?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I would say Litecoin fits in as a store of value and as a peer-to-peer or some type of one entity to another transactionable currency.
And how does your work with Cornerstone Global Management, LLC, fit in with your work at the Litecoin Foundation, if at all?
Sure, yeah. So it does fit in that during the time that I've been with the foundation and just in the space in general, myself and a few others, we go back and forth and we talk about what are some of the barriers we think are are there that would bring in more adoption from people that are not necessarily in the space now, or what's going to keep people in the space other than just the trading aspect of the crypto? Because basically they're looked at like, you know, you're looking at speculative assets at this point. And there's not a lot of real world use that's taking place at this point. And so how do you solve those issues of taking down a barrier for, you know, a more efficient way of getting into the space or getting your coins, and then also utilizing them? And so John Kim and I, we co-founded this company, Cornerstone, with the idea of breaking down the barrier of employees getting it as a method of payment. The tricky part was doing it in a way that it's not infringing on traditional ways of receiving your pay now, where it's going to be very light, if almost zero burden on any employee or employer, and then the employee is going to be able to have as many choices as possible with the cryptocurrency, you know, like where they want it to go, how they want to use it. So what we did was we came up with a program called CP3, so it's the Crypto Pay and Pension Plan. And what happens is, let's say I'm your employer and I want to pay you $1,000 a month for your work, and you want to take $100 of that and you want to have it automatically changed into crypto and put wherever you want it to go without you having to constantly go onto an exchange, put your money on there, change it over to the cryptocurrency, then have it, you know, manually take it and send it to wherever you want it to go. If you were able to do all that in one fell swoop ahead of time, so when payday came, it automatically did that for you, that's a pretty big deal, right? And you don't necessarily have to have your own bank account to do it, which is an even bigger deal when you're talking about people who don't, you know, they're in areas that don't allow them to necessarily have bank accounts. So underdeveloped countries where we have the majority of our youngest workers, newest workers coming into the workforce, you know, from like 18 to 30, those are all mostly coming from underdeveloped countries, not places like the United States. But in the United States, when you have older employees, they're used to a certain way of getting their money, which is an automatic payment, goes into their bank account, and then they're able to use their debit card and whatever else, right? Maybe they have a second direct deposit that sends it to an IRA or whatever else, okay? So what we wanted to do was create that same scenario, but with cryptocurrencies in mind. So when I pay you $1,000, 900 of it's going into your regular bank account, and you've already determined that another 100 is going to go over into a bank account that's held by the money transmitter, which in this case for the United States is Uphold, sent to an Uphold account. They then exchange it over automatically into whatever cryptocurrencies that you chose ahead of time, and then it's going to send it to all those wallets that you identified ahead of time for them to go to. So one could be like Bitcoin IRA, one could be Celsius because you want to earn interest off your crypto. One could be like the Turnio Block card, where you can now use it as a debit card, and the Block card you're able to use anywhere where Visa is accepted. So you're talking about 40 million places around the world. So your crypto goes on there, and then you're able to spend it, and it's turned into fiat as you spend it, which isn't ideal, but it works, you know, because in this space right now we're in that in-between time, right? Or if you want to send it to your cold storage wallet and just forget about it, you can do that too. You can do all those simultaneously through this program, and then you don't have to go on the exchange. You're avoiding the exchange. The exchange, you know, the transaction fees are lower than most of them, and it's far lower than anything you're going to get at a Bitcoin ATM or any place else. And so we're solving a bunch of different issues all at the same time.
What gave you the idea for this?
Well, so like I said, we were talking about it quite often, the barriers, but I also have a friend, his name is Arthur Van Pelt. He lives in the Netherlands, and before the first Litecoin Summit in 2018, he was talking back and forth with me about the same concept. And so it really kind of gave birth from there, and that's where we are now. So I would talk to John Kim, then we decided to create a company that would help support that type of a concept, and it just kind of grew from there.
Well, what's next for not only the Litecoin Foundation, but also Cornerstone Global Management?
Yeah, so we're in the beta right now. The live beta will go out about 10 to 14 days from now. So all the people that have signed up for the beta will then be incrementally brought into the program. We're really excited to see how that's going to work out for the next couple of months, and then we've already signed an agreement with a company out in Southeast Asia that's going to be able to give us exposure to that entire geographic area, which is great. And then we'll keep working with other companies sprinkled throughout the world we're going to be basically everywhere. We'll make sure we're in Africa, Europe, South America, India, doesn't matter where it is. And so our idea is by the time the end of 2020, start of 2021 comes around, we literally are global.
That's great. And then how about with the Litecoin Foundation?
Yep. So Litecoin Foundation, obviously working on the confidential transactions is priority number one, but then also making sure we're getting out there and providing awareness and adoption through partnerships and projects with other crypto-based companies or more traditional non-crypto entities as well.
Great. Well, we've sat down today with David Schwartz, the project director of the Litecoin Foundation, as well as the CEO of Cornerstone Global Management, LLC, at the Blockchain Expo in North America. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
Yeah, thanks again. I appreciate it.